What if piracy was as easy, as elegant, and as simple to use as Netflix? For one brief, glorious moment, it was, and the entertainment industry absolutely lost its bloody mind. Right then, today we're not talking about shady torrent sites filled with pop-ups or dodgy zip files. We are cracking open the digital casket of a legend, Popcorn Time, a piece of software that appeared out of nowhere in 2014 and almost overnight became Hollywood's public enemy number one. We're going to perform a full autopsy on how a group of anonymous developers from Argentina created something so brilliant and disruptive that it forced the world's biggest studios to wage all-out war, and how that very brilliance led to its inevitable death. To understand the earthquake that was Popcorn Time, we need to remember what life was like before it. If you wanted to pirate a movie back in the early 2010s, you had to be prepared for a bit of a mission. It was a process, a kind of nerd's ritual. First, you needed a torrent client, like uTorrent or Vooz. Then, you had to navigate the digital swamps of sites like the Pirate Bay or Kick-Ass Torrents, dodging ads for online casinos and promises of sketchy hookups. You had to learn to read the signs, checking the number of seeders and leechers, reading the comments to see if the file was legit, or just 90 minutes of a low-budget Russian film with Korean hard subs. After you finally found a torrent that looked promising, the download would begin. It could take 20 minutes or 8 hours, depending on your internet connection and the generosity of the seeders. While you waited, there was always that low-level anxiety. Is this a virus that's going to turn my laptop into a brick? Or is the video quality going to be something filmed on a potato in the back of a cinema? Once the download was complete, it often came in multiple .rar files you had to extract. And only then, finally, could you watch your movie. It was clunky, it was intimidating for the average user, and it carried a degree of risk. It was a subculture, not a mainstream phenomenon. It was like having to know car mechanics just to be able to drive to the beach. And then, in March 2014, everything changed. With no fanfare, no big marketing campaign, Popcorn Time appeared online. And it was beautiful. Its genius wasn't in the underlying technology. It still used the BitTorrent protocol, the same as everything else. Its genius was in the presentation. When you opened Popcorn Time, you didn't see a list of weirdly named files. You saw an interface that was a near-perfect carbon copy of Netflix. There were high-resolution movie posters, synopsis, IMDb ratings, trailers, all neatly organized by genre, popularity, and recent releases. You would simply scroll, find a film you were in the mood for, select the quality, 720p or 1080p, and subtitles in your language, and click Watch Now. And that's where the magic happened. No lengthy downloads, no .rar files, no viruses. The film just started playing, streaming directly from the torrent swarm. They took that entire complicated, intimidating process and hid it behind a single button. It was piracy for the masses. Your mom could use it. Your granddad could use it. Suddenly, the barrier to entry for high-quality piracy was completely demolished. And to make it even more dangerous for the industry, it was open source. Its source code was available for anyone to see, modify, and improve. It was an act of digital defiance, wrapped in the most user-friendly UI imaginable. The name itself was a stroke of marketing genius. Popcorn Time. Perfect, simple, inviting. It was a complete game changer, turning a niche hobby into a mainstream-ready experience overnight. By the way, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the renegades of the digital world, this is exactly what we do here at Southern Signal. Hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss our next investigation. Now back to the story. As you might expect, Popcorn Time's popularity didn't grow, it exploded. It spread through forums, social media, and word of mouth like a wildfire on a hot summer's day. Suddenly, millions of people who would never have dreamed of using the Pirate Bay were streaming the latest Hollywood blockbusters for free, with a user experience that, let's be honest, was often better than the paid services. And that's when the Eye of Sauron, in the form of the MPAA and other industry bodies, turned its gaze to Argentina. To them, this wasn't just another pirate site. This was an existential nightmare. Popcorn Time didn't feel illegal. It didn't have the sketchy, slapped-together look of the piracy underworld. It looked and felt like a legitimate competitor. A competitor that offered a vastly superior catalog to Netflix for free. The threat was twofold. First, there was the obvious loss of revenue, but the deeper danger was that Popcorn Time was resetting consumer expectations. It was showing the world what a perfect streaming service could look like, a universal catalog, instant access to the newest titles, a flawless interface. It was making the legal services with their fragmented libraries and geo-restrictions look ancient and greedy by comparison. The hunt began. Lawyers were mobilized, private investigators were hired. The pressure on the original developers, a group of friends from Buenos Aires, became immense. They weren't an organized crime syndicate. They were just a few clever blokes who built something incredible. Within days, they buckled. They posted a farewell letter on the official site explaining that the project had become too dangerous. On March 14, 2014, less than a month after it launched, the original Popcorn Time was dead. But here's the beauty and the curse of open source software. When the original devs pulled the plug, they'd already let the genie out of the bottle. The code was on GitHub, available for anyone to download. The death of Popcorn Time lasted maybe a few hours. Almost immediately, other groups of anonymous developers around the world picked up the source code and started their own projects. The era of the Popcorn Time forks was born. Suddenly, there wasn't one Popcorn Time to hunt down, there were dozens. The most prominent ones became popcorntime.io and popcorntime.sh, formerly known as .se. The project became a digital Hydra. Every time the industry managed to cut off one head by seizing a domain name, for instance, two new ones seemed to spring up in its place. It became a global game of cat and mouse. Studios would sue ISPs to block access to the sites. The developers would just switch domains. The studios started using copyright trolls, law firms that would track the IP addresses of Popcorn Time users and send them threatening letters demanding settlements of thousands of dollars. In response, the Popcorn Time forks started building VPN services directly into the app, making tracking more difficult. This decentralized battle raged for years. It was a war fought in the shadows of the internet with faceless developers fighting against a multi-billion-dollar corporate Goliath. But the biggest threat to Popcorn Time's legacy didn't just come from the outside. It came from within. The anonymous, decentralized nature of the project was its greatest strength, but it was also its greatest weakness. With no central leadership or unified goal, different forks started going in different directions. What started as a clean, ad-free project driven by passion began to get corrupted. Some developers saw a chance to make a buck. They started injecting ads into the interface. Others made shady deals with VPN services, getting kickbacks for every user who signed up through the app. Infighting began. There were accusations of developers hijacking domains from each other, of power struggles over who should lead the project. The community became fragmented, trust eroded. Users became confused about which fork was the official or safe one to use. What was once a unified movement became a collection of warring fiefdoms, each trying to cash in on the famous name. The initial idealism was being eaten away by greed and ego, a tale as old as time itself. Amidst all the legal battles, domain seizures, and internal squabbling, the real turning point, the key moment of clarity, wasn't a single court victory or the takedown of a specific site. It was the realization of why the entertainment industry was fighting so desperately. The reason Popcorn Time had to be destroyed at all costs wasn't just because it enabled copyright infringement. It was because Popcorn Time exposed the fundamental lie at the heart of the streaming era. The industry wanted us to believe that creating a unified service with all the content was impossible. They told us the reasons we needed 5 different subscriptions were complicated, like licensing rights, regional distribution deals, legal complexities. Popcorn Time, built by a handful of developers in their spare time, proved that was all rubbish. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was technically trivial to create a single, global, and user-friendly platform that aggregated all the world's content. The only thing stopping it wasn't technology, it was greed. It was the turf wars between studios, the refusal to collaborate, and the desire for each company to build its own walled garden to trap consumers in. Popcorn Time wasn't just a piracy tool. It was a working prototype of what the future of entertainment should look like. And by existing, it served as a constant, embarrassing reminder of just how anti-consumer and deliberately fractured the legal system was. They weren't just fighting piracy, they were fighting to protect their broken business model from a demonstrably superior alternative. They had to kill Popcorn Time, not just to stop the revenue bleed, but to erase the very idea it represented. In the end, the combined weight of relentless legal persecution, constant pressure, and internal decay became too much. One by one, the major Popcorn Time forks either faded into obscurity or were officially shut down. Today, the name lives on in a few cheap clones, but the golden era is over. The Autopsy reveals multiple causes of death. Murder at the hands of the entertainment industry, yes, but also assisted suicide from internal mistrust and greed.
popcorn time was lightning in a bottle. For a few years, it showed us a glimpse of a streaming paradise, a world without borders, without competing subscriptions, where everything was one click away. It was an idea so powerful and perfectly executed that the industry had to use every weapon in its arsenal to smash it. And while the software may be dead, its ghost still haunts every streaming service that forces us to pay more for less. If this story of digital disruption fascinated you, then check out our next video on the secret internet archives preserving our culture from corporate deletion.